Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan. My name is Khalid Azhari, a member of the board, and I have the pleasure to moderate this event. Let me first introduce our guest speakers. At the far right is Ms. Ruhan Nagra. She is University Network member for human rights activist. And to her left is Mr. Robert Taylor, and to his left also Ms. Lydia Gerard. They are the concerned citizen of St. John Parish. This is an area where it's hit by pollution from factories owned by Japanese companies. You have all the details and the pamphlets on the table for everyone. And today they will speak about the cancer rate spike near a Denka chemical plant in Louisiana. And before they start speaking, they will have some video to show most of their cause. And after that, every speaker will give us a short introduction, and this will be followed by Q&A later on. And the case is a very alarming case all over actually the world, where pollution is a serious danger facing the humanity, but it's not in the headlines of the news, unfortunately. We should, I think, the media should care more about it, as we have, that's why we hold this press conference today. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please welcome our guest speaker. Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
I'm from Reserve, Louisiana. Been living here all my life. Lost one of my sons at the age of 20. He was diagnosed with cancer at age 18. He died at 20. So he was working at DuPont. Like I talked to his doctor, and he said the majority of my patients that's from St. John Parish, they have cancer. He said, what is going on in St. John?
So I've been here 52 years. I know this area as good as a book. You know, and it's Cancer Alley. No doubt about it.
When I really realized something's wrong, when I lost 6 family members months apart, all of them were in this area, you know, and they all had different kind of cancer. Down this street, it's about every other house somebody have experienced cancer. But every other house. The plant is on the other side of those trees. Only thing separate them is a fence. They were a really sweet couple.
It's dangerous. And people who work there don't last long after they retire. The stuff what they working in the plant with kill them in the long run.
We don't know this air is bad because this is what we've breathed and learned to live with all our life.
has determined that the likelihood of contracting cancer from air pollution is 800 times the national average as a result of emissions from DuPont. They have all the science. They know all the results of this. We've been considered expendable. Once you demonized a group of people, as has been done to the African Americans in the United States, that's the first part of being able to commit genocide against them. I could hear DuPont saying, well, it's just some of them colored guys down there. You know, when they pick a spot like that, it's because we're our most vulnerable.
And they ain't helping, you know. Since I've been in St. John Parish, and had a DuPont man knock on my door and said, Mr. Perry, you all right? People don't care about nobody, man. All they care about making a dollar. And they don't care who they knock out the way to make that dollar.
Because DuPont need to make a certain level of profit, they tell me, why don't I get up? Why don't they ask DuPont that? They're better able to do that than the poor people here who've sacrificed their lives, blood and tears for this. This is my home. I chose to live here. I bought this lot and I built a home here and we raised our... Don't we have the right to do that?
We were here first. They invaded us. And when they came, they said they was going to make it better for us. They still had great opportunities and everything to grow. Now the whole story has changed.
Good afternoon. Thanks so much for being here today. My name is Ruhan Nagra. I'm the Executive Director of the University Network for Human Rights. As you saw in that short video, we recently released the results of a household health survey that we conducted in March 2018 in the area around the Denka facility. And I'm going to, as quickly as I can, take you through some of our key findings and, hoping that you'll have questions, and that's where we should spend most of our time before I turn it over to Mr. Robert Taylor to my left. So what did we do? What were the basic contours of our study? We surveyed over 500 households in the area 2.5 kilometers around the Denka plant. We surveyed over 500 households, including 60% of the households that sit within 1.5 kilometers of the Denka plant. I'll show you this in the next slide with maps in a second. And we collected data on cancer and other chloroprene-associated health conditions in both adults and children. So here you can see on the left a Google Earth image, and on the right a census tract map of the area. Each color in that map on the right represents a different census tract. The red dot in the center is the Denka plant. And the orange census tract is the census tract that in December 2015, the EPA said has the highest likelihood in the country by far of developing cancer from air pollution. That orange census tract where the Denka plant is located has the highest risk of getting cancer from air pollution according to the EPA. Now, what you see, the outer circle that you see is the entire survey area. That is the area within a 2.5 kilometer radius of the plant. As you can see, we've divided the survey area into two zones, Zone 1 and Zone 2. Zone 1 is the area closest to the plant. That is the area within 1.5 kilometers of the plant. And so from now on, for the rest of the presentation, every time I say Zone 1, I'm talking about that area within 1.5 kilometers of the plant. And we surveyed about 60% of the households in that area. 6 out of every 10 households were surveyed. In Zone 2, the area between 1.5 and 2.5 kilometers of the plant, that outer concentric circle, we surveyed 20% of the households in that area. So we intentionally increased our sampling frequency as we got closer to the plant because our hypothesis was that rates of cancer and other illness among the people we survey will be higher as we get closer to the plant. And that was in fact the case, as you'll see in a minute. The gray dots that you see are households. As you can see, the orange in Zone 1, you have sort of this most of the houses in Zone 1 are this cluster in that orange census tract. Then there are other houses in the orange census tract that are part of Zone 2, as you can see. So what were our sort of overall key findings? Among the people we surveyed, rates of cancer and other illness are unusually high, and that'll become clear in a minute. And virtually every chloroprene-associated health condition, including cancer, is more prevalent among surveyed residents who live in Zone 1, within 1.5 kilometers of Denka, than among surveyed residents who live farther away from the plant in Zone 2, between 1.5 and 2.5 kilometers from the plant. Very quickly, the survey area is predominantly Black. This is a predominantly Black community that lives in the area around the facility. If you break down the racial composition by zone and look at zone 1 and Zone 2 separately, there's an even higher proportion of Black residents who live in Zone 1 than in Zone 2. 93.2% of the people that we surveyed in Zone 1 identify as Black. 68% of the people we surveyed in Zone 2 identify as Black. But in both zones, we're talking about a predominantly African American area. The following 4 slides are a comparison of respondent, resident, and national cancer prevalence. So let me just take a minute here to explain. When we conducted the household health survey, we surveyed 1 member of each household and asked that person about the health conditions of everybody else who lived in that household. The person who directly responded to survey questions is called the respondent. And everybody about whom we collected health information, the respondents plus their household members, are referred to as residents. And we did analyze our data in a disaggregated fashion where we looked separately at respondent data, the data of people who directly answered our questions, and resident data, the data of everybody about whom information was collected, respondents and their household members. So you'll see breakdowns in the next few slides between respondent data on the one hand and resident data on the other hand. Here we see the age-adjusted cancer prevalence nationally and among survey respondents within 1.5 kilometers of the plant. So here we're talking about Zone 1, the area closest to the plant. 3.4851% is the national cancer prevalence, the national age-adjusted cancer prevalence in 2015. The prevalence of cancer among our survey respondents, those who directly answered our survey questions, was 5.97% in Zone 1, the area closest to the plant. So that is 71% higher than the national rate. The cancer prevalence among the survey respondents was 71% higher than the national rate. Then when we eliminated anybody in our pool who was exposed to smoke in the household on a daily basis, that percentage, the prevalence actually went up a bit. So now our survey prevalence is 6.1136% among our survey respondents after eliminating anyone exposed to smoke in the household on a daily basis. Of course, smoking is sort of the #1 point that people raise when you do a cancer study. Did you account for smoking? Did you account for smoking? So yes, we accounted for it. This is one way you can account for it. We just eliminated all the smokers in our pool and all the people exposed to smoke in our pool, and it didn't really affect the cancer prevalence at all. Here we're looking at residents. So the previous 2 slides looked at respondent data, people who responded to the survey. Now we're looking at everybody about whom we collected information, respondents as well as their household members. And as you can see, compared to that national cancer prevalence, the survey prevalence among residents surveyed in Zone 1 is 44% higher than the national rate. And then with smokers or people exposed to smoke eliminated, the cancer prevalence among survey residents is 48% higher than the national rate. We then did a statistical analysis to sort of look at, the previous 4 slides you saw were sort of a raw comparison between age-adjusted national cancer prevalence and age-adjusted survey prevalence. That's useful but it doesn't tell you, how significant your numbers are. So what does it actually mean? Is it actually significant that 48% of the survey residents had a higher cancer prevalence than the national rate? Is that significant? The Monte Carlo method attempts to tell us something about the significance of the numbers we're looking at. What this method does is it takes a simulated population with the same race, age, and sex demographics as our survey sample, and projects onto that simulated population the kinds of cancer prevalences that you would expect to see based on national rates, and creates a distribution of those. So that simulation is run 10,000 times to account for inherent uncertainty. And then you can compare the distribution you get with that simulated population to your actual cancer prevalence. And then you can get a sense of how unusual your numbers are compared to what you would expect to see. Happy to answer more questions about this, at the end or one-on-one. The sort of threshold for statistical significance, as you might know, is 0.05 or 5%. I'm going to refer to this as in percentage rather than decimal form through the rest of the presentation. But when we talk about p-values and whether or not our p-values are statistically significant, we're looking at a threshold of 5%. Less than 5% means that a p-value is statistically significant. Among residents as a whole, so now, previously I was talking about respondents and residents. Now, for the sake of time, I'm pretty much just talking about residents, everybody about whom we gathered information. Among our residents, the cancer prevalence, as you can see here, was 5.4% among residents we surveyed. Now, what does that number mean? How significant is it? Well, if you simulate a population with the same race, age, and sex demographics as our survey residents, this is the distribution of cancer prevalences you'd expect to see, and the median is the most frequent, or the closest to what you would expect to see in a population with the same demographics as ours. And that median is 4.4%. And our actual value is 5.4%. Here you can see our actual value is represented by that solid red line, and it's quite a distance away from the dotted red line. In fact, there's only a 3.43% chance that cancer prevalence would be as high as it is in our survey population. The odds that we would see a cancer prevalence that we see the cancer prevalence that we see is only 3.43%, less than 5%, a statistically significant value. Here we break down that cancer prevalence by zone. So we look at zone 1 and zone 2. As you can see with zone 1, this red line over here, it's way off to the right. There's only a 0.33% chance that cancer prevalence would be as high as it is in zone 1 due to chance. In other words, it's highly likely that there's something unusual, that there's something going on here. This is very unusual. It's a very, very small p-value that we see for zone 1 for those residents who are closest to the Denka plant. We also analyzed tachycardia diagnoses, abnormally fast heart rate. This is a condition that's associated with chloroprene exposure. And we also did Monte Carlo analyses of these, with one caveat. These are based on sex breakdowns only, not age and race, because there wasn't comparative national data based on age and race. So here, we look at tachycardia under the clinical consensus definition, which is a resting pulse rate of more than 100 beats per minute. By that definition, the prevalence of tachycardia in our survey population was so unusual as to have a p-value of 0%. In other words, we would expect to see something close to 1.5% prevalence of tachycardia, and instead we're seeing 10.6% in zone 1 and 8% in zone 2. These are very unusual values. And just to be clear, the question on the survey that was asked here was, has a doctor or other healthcare professional ever told you that you have abnormally fast heart rate? It's not that we were leaving it up to folks to kind of, decide whether they think they have abnormally fast heart rate. They were asked, has a doctor or other healthcare professional told you this? When you use a different definition of tachycardia, the revised clinical guideline, which is 90 beats per minute instead of 100, the prevalence of tachycardia under this definition is higher because the threshold is lower for beats per minute. Even under this definition, though, we're looking at highly unusual rates of tachycardia, a 0.03% p-value in zone 1 in that area closest to the plant. The rest of the slides are very straightforward. These are other chloroprene-associated health conditions, non-cancer health conditions that were not analyzed using a Monte Carlo method because of the lack of sort of comparative national data. So these are just sort of raw percentages of what we found among survey respondents. In every single case, you'll see that prevalence dropped as we get further from the plant, and these are all chloroprene-associated symptoms. So nearly half of children in zone 1 who in households that we surveyed in zone 1 suffer from headaches, nosebleeds, or both. Headaches are associated with chloroprene exposure. Nosebleeds we included on the survey because it's something that it's a frequent complaint of residents is that children who attend school in the area or live in the area suffer from nosebleeds. Nearly 40% of survey respondents who live in zone 1 experience chest pain or heart palpitations or both on a regular basis. Again, a chloroprene-associated symptom. Over a third of respondents in that area closest to the plant experience wheezing or difficulty breathing or both on a regular basis. And again, in every slide, you'll see that the prevalence drops slightly in zone 2. Over half of respondents experience headaches, dizziness, and/or lightheadedness on a regular basis, those who live closest to the plant in zone 1. Nearly half experience eye pain, irritation, or watery eyes on a regular basis. Over 40% of respondents experience cough, sneezing, or sore hoarse throat most of the time, 4 or more days per week on a regular basis, those who live closest to the plant in zone 1. Over a third experience skin rash, irritation, or itchy skin on a regular basis in zone 1. Nearly half smell chemical odors inside their home at least a few times per month. Over 3/4 smell chemical odors outside their home at least a few times per month. And 84% of people in zone 1 report that they're, quote, extremely concerned about pollution in their community. No surprise there. So, quick overview of our findings. A consistent correlation between rates of illness and proximity to the plant. A statistically significant improbability that elevated rates of cancer in the area are simply due to chance. Nearly half of children in households within 1.5 kilometers of the plant suffer from headaches, nosebleeds, or both. Extremely unusual prevalence of tachycardia, rapid pulse or rapid heart rate, multiple times higher than expected, highly unlikely, virtually impossible to be due to chance. And a third to a half of respondents in zone 1 in that area within 1.5 kilometers of the plant experience chloroprene-associated symptoms on a regular basis. And finally, what has happened since July, since the end of July when we released this study? First of all, there was a very important development recently, which is that the St. John Parish School Board voted to commission a study to assess the feasibility of moving children out of Fifth Ward Elementary School, which is an elementary school located less than 1/3 of a mile away from the Denka plant. Children who go to that school are exposed to chloroprene, 8 hours a day while in school, and then often the rest of the day when they go home, they also live close to the plant. And recently, the school board voted to commission a study to assess the feasibility of moving kids out of the school. According to a recent article, Executive Committee school member Albert Burrell said the school board wants to move very cautiously with the information it has now, but he added that protests by environmentalists at Fifth Ward on the first day of school this month, as well as a recent study from the University Network for Human Rights, brought the issue back to the board's attention, unquote. And secondly, it was recently reported that in light of our findings, the governor of Louisiana, and we met with his office a couple of days after the release of our study, we met with his office as well as the Louisiana Department of Health and the Louisiana Department of Environmental Quality. He has instructed the Louisiana Department of Health to conduct its own study of cancer rates in the area of the Denka plant. Now, this is good news on the one hand. It shows a level of concern and investment. On the other hand, it is critical to emphasize that study or no study, emissions need to come down to EPA recommended levels immediately. We don't need studies to tell us that this community is at much higher risk than the national average of getting cancer from air pollution. The EPA told us that in 2015. So we already know that this community faces extremely high risk of getting cancer from air pollution, and that's all we need to know in order to demand that emissions come down to EPA recommended levels. Studies really shouldn't be needed. That said, it's of course a step in the right direction when local government shows concern and takes some steps as it is doing here. So with that, I'll turn it over.
All right.
Yeah.
Mr. Taylor, please.
Hello, my name is Robert Taylor, and I certainly want to thank everyone for having us here. I was born and raised along the riverbanks of the Mississippi in St. John the Baptist Parish in the year 1940. My parents were involved in the agricultural industry. My father worked at the sugar refinery, and I was raised in an agrarian society. That changed by the time I became an adult, when the plantation owners sold the plantations out to the petrochemical industry. And the field workers and the people who worked in the sugar refineries were left there. This was home for us, you know. So when this industry came in, it found us totally unprepared. We knew nothing about it. Where I lived by this time as an adult, where I had grown up there and I built a home, started to raise a family, this plant came in. We knew nothing about it. We didn't know what it was. We had no input into it. They never consulted us about anything. And when this thing went into operation in 1969, that's the year my last child was born. She came home less than a half mile from that plant, and that's where she spent her life until chloroprene took away her life, as it did so many people. It took her career away. She got diseases I can't pronounce still that made her vulnerable to other diseases. The whole community was racked. I grew up in a community, a happy kid, like other kids. My school was less than 1,500 feet from that plant that they built there. That wasn't there when I went to school, but now my children were there and my grandchildren. This Fifth Ward school, which EPA determined, tests showed that they forced DuPont to do, as well as EPA testing the air, showed that this school suffered 400 to 700 times what EPA says is a safe level. And that's what caused the formation immediately of this group of people in the community, call ourselves the concerned citizens. When we found that our community, which is in that 1.5 kilometer range, and this school was actually being bombarded 400 to 700, and we had this information. EPA knew it, they discovered it, DuPont, it was fact, and we weren't doing anything. This was in 2016, the summer of 2016, when a group of us got together, the local people, and formed this organization and approached the government. We went directly to the school board and said, you've got to save these children. Here are the facts. That was in the summer of 2016. Those children are still there. The levels of chloroprene has not gone down. It has never went anywhere near what EPA says is a safe level. And in our 3 years of struggle, the response of our government was to completely ignore us. And when I say our government, I mean from our local governing body in the parish, or what is a county, all the way to the governor's office. The governor never once entertained us. We marched, we went to his office, he never once would even speak with us. The local government, from the parish president, there was one councilman, one elected official in the state of Louisiana that came to the aid of his constituents, the people who elected him. The rest of that sitting council, the administration, they all totally ignored us who elected them. We, the people of St. John, elected those people to represent us. And they did like the state government did. They represented DuPont Denka. They refused to hear our pleas. They refused. Evidence is that those 400 to 500 black children are still being forced into what I consider a gas chamber. Today, they are still there. As a result of the test that Ruhan and her group did, and the agitations of our group, we picketed and boycotted. The school board has finally, 3 years later, decided to consider moving the children. And where we go from here, to me, is a mystery. What in the 21st century does it take for people to at least treat this group of people like they are humans? It's unbelievable to me that they could tolerate us in that particular census tract being 800 times the risk of national average. Why would my grandchild and my child and myself and my wife and daughter have to be subjected to that? It's, I've been asked the question, why don't you move? I mean, I'm 78 years old. I'll be 79 in a week or two. I worked hard and I built this home for and the rest of my neighbors in that community, they were my peers. We went to OLG and to Fifth Ward when it was the colored high school. And we built that community. We built our homes there. The people in that community are poor working class people, but we were able to build our homes. We own those homes. And this gigantic plant plops down on top of us and have the audacity to tell us if we don't like it, why don't we move? I mean, it's just unthinkable for me that it's taken 3 years to get the attention of people to act in what I would consider a humane manner. How could you allow a poor community, and I wouldn't care if they were black or white, of course, I can't deal with the race issue because we are poor people. We struggle to build this little community and our church that's there and our homes. And these people said to us, why don't you move if you don't like it? DuPont Denka said to us in one of the newspapers, you have to prove that we're doing this. You can't prove that we're poisoning you. I don't know that we can or not. I think with the help of people like Ruhan and our organization and other organizations worldwide now that's actually coming to our aid, we may be able to prove it, but for what I consider, I don't know if they're $1 billion corporation, but for them to say to us, poor former sugarcane workers who are now trying to better our lives in spite of that attack by industry. We live in an area called Cancer Alley, 80-mile area between New Orleans and Baton Rouge. And they call it Cancer Alley because of the concentration of petrochemical plants on those former plantation workers. It's unbelievable that we have up to 200 plants concentrated in that one area. Our adjoining parish of St. James Parish, which is one of the smaller parishes, has 32 chemical plants in it. And there are 3 more on the drawing board. And the federal government and the state and local government, even though they call this place Cancer Alley, they know what's causing the cancer, and they are still allowing this kind of stuff to go on. They're building a $1 billion plant right now, 5 or 6 miles upriver from me in St. James Parish, not doing anything about what plants like DuPont Denka are doing to the poor people in that community. And we are just hoping for, that's why I'm so grateful for the opportunity to try to tell our story and to ask these people, especially the ones that we elect to protect us, to do their job. Our Department of Environmental Quality, the director came into our community as a result of our work, and he attacked us. In view of God and everybody, this man, who is the secretary of DEQ, came in and attacked me personally, calling me names. I'm a fearmonger and a liar, that I'm spreading disinformation. He attacked my organization, which is made up of people, almost everybody's my age in this group. He attacked us. I mean, in front of everybody is aware of it. Our elected officials did not attempt to protect us from the attack of this man, who is supposed to be the regulator. He's supposed to protect us from industry.
Please make it short.
And I probably could go on, but I'd better end this now, because I know time is limited, and Ms. Gerard probably would have some important things to say.
Thank you.
But I certainly appreciate your concern in giving us the opportunity to speak here. Thank you.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
My name is Lydia Gerard, and I too was born and raised in St. John Parish, about 1,500, 2,000 feet from the Denka plant. I've been there all my life, raised my family there as well. When my husband and I heard about the meeting that the EPA and DEQ came out with the information letting us know about the high risk of cancer, that St. John Parish had a bullseye on it. You know, they had this red dot on our parish showing that we had the highest cancer risk in the country. And we were concerned about it because one reason that we live there, and another, my husband Walter had been diagnosed with kidney cancer only 2 years prior to that, to us finding out. And he had been healthy all his life. He was a builder, he worked outside, he played golf. And when he asked the doctor, you know, what caused it, the doctor told him, "You're just unlucky." Well, that luck or unluck, we believe, is a result of the chloroprene emissions from the DuPont Denka plant. We're sitting there. When the leaves are dead, the trees are dead in the wintertime. Now my house is facing the plant. I can see the plant from my front yard. It's unbelievable that they're going to tell us that, you know, we shouldn't be concerned, or it's no big deal, when you walk up and down the street, as you saw in the video, and we can point out every house that someone has cancer. The kids in the area, there's so much risk of asthma, or kids that have asthma, I should say, and respiratory problems. When I was growing up, you hardly ever heard of anybody that had, you know, those kind of problems. In our area, there are 3 dialysis centers, and the population of 45,000,
Well, the parish is part.
the parish, and in the parish there are 3 dialysis centers. So that's a strange thing to me. Why there's so many, there's so many illnesses. There are some things that can be related to the chloroprene, and we have so many chemical plants that Mr. Taylor said. We don't know how much exposure we have into chloroprene and other emissions. So it seems that something needs to be done. We look at the latest information of what the school board is doing. They're doing a study. How many more studies do we need? You've gotten it from the top people, from the EPA and the LDEQ. How much more do you need? They're telling us this. So you're going to wait and do more studies? We're fortunate that the University Network came out and helped us and did a survey, a health survey, which we knew what the outcome was going to be because we live there. We know the people there. But we are grateful that they did this. Other people need proof. We didn't need proof. The proof, the studies are for everybody else. The school board taking action now, or supposedly taking action of getting the children out. We appreciate that. It's needed. The children are very close to the plant. But the Louisiana, not the environment, the state,
the Department of
the
Health.
Department of
Dr.
Health,
Gerard,
yes.
yeah.
The Department of Health has said nowhere in the parish is safe. So even though they're going to move children possibly from this one school and put them in others, they're still not safe because the emissions are throughout the parish. They're just closer in proximity to the plant. So it's a good step, and it's showing the other leaders of the parish that something needs to be done. We all can't move. We don't want to move. The plant has to bring the emissions down, or they need to move. It's always said that, like Mr. Taylor said, why are you going to move? My great-great-grandparents own the land that I'm building my house on right now. They bought property from the middle of the Mississippi River to the swamp. And they've left this to their families. We've been there far longer than the plant has. So it's their responsibility to be good neighbors and protect the people in the area. They're emitting the chloroprene and whatever else, and they don't see the need to bring these emissions down. The EPA has given them guidelines and what they think is safe. But because it's not a standard that's in black and white, they won't listen, they won't do anything. And that is wrong. They're using permits that they have had since the plant opened in 64, 69 when they started operations. They have not revised any permits. They have terrible audits where there are so many leaks and findings. It's ridiculous. So not only is the chloroprene, but it's other emissions, and we want it to stop. It's no reason that they can't do what's necessary. They put in 4 technologies that would reduce the chloroprene. Supposedly it was done voluntarily, but only voluntarily after our group started making noise and letting them know, we know what you're doing. Then it was voluntary to put the emissions in place to reduce the emissions, which has not gone down to what is necessary, and we want it down. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We would like to open the floor to Q&A. Please, Anthony.
Thanks for coming.
Anthony, we need the mic, Anthony.
I can't have
Okay, give him the mic. That's special for you.
Thank you, sir. Hi, Anthony Trotter from ABC News. Thanks for coming. Do you have a message for Denka? You came a long way.
Yes. Yes, certainly. Respect our human rights, Denka, please. We are human beings. At least talk to us. Don't exercise your control over our DEQ by giving them instructions to deny us access to information that is due us. I think that's very disrespectful of us, and it's highly indicative of the fact that DEQ is not working to represent us. Anytime Denka can order them to break the law and deny us access to information that's put on a website by our government so that we may access it and not be dumb and ignorant about what is going on, that we have access to that information. And they actually had the power, they had the audacity to tell Chuck Brown to deny us access to that information. That to me says that they don't think very much of us. And they got a program called Near Neighbors. I suggest, like Lydia suggested, they be good neighbors.
Thank you. Just follow-up question. Did you contact Denka company in Tokyo or their representatives? Did you try to contact them?
We've tried multiple times to contact Denka. We first tried to contact them months ago by email. We contacted them by fax. After that, no response. We then traveled to Tokyo in June to confront them directly outside their annual shareholder meeting. Mr. Taylor, Ms. Gerard, and I were all there outside Denka's AGM, asking them face-to-face for a meeting. They denied our request for a meeting. We had an exchange with them for about 45 minutes. And after that, they sent us an email through their lawyers saying that they would not meet with us.
Thank you. Next question, please. Yes, go ahead. Please come to the front mic.
Hi, I'm Etienne Balmer from the French press agency AFP. Just want to know how many pupils, children are also in this school in Zone 1, and how many people in total are living in the Zone 1. This is just a side detail. And another question is that are you also undertaking a legal action, like claims, in order to maybe accelerate your request of reducing those emission levels and seeking for any financial retribution? Thanks.
Should I?
Yeah. I'll quickly answer one of the questions just about the number of people in Zone 1. I can tell you off the top of my head that there are about 445 households in Zone 1. Out of those, we surveyed 60%, more than 250. And the remaining questions of the number of students in Fifth Ward and the legal action, I'll leave to Mr. Taylor and Ms. Gerard.
Okay. We did file an injunctive lawsuit against Denka, and there are numerous other claims against the company by various other law firms and people. And there are, at my latest count, 500 students that are forced to sit there 7 hours a day at Fifth Ward Elementary School.
And about those lawsuits, I mean, where is it? At what stage is it right now? This injunctive lawsuit against Denka?
It's still in the federal system. It's the federal courts have not been very kind to us. We have a judge that is very strict, so we're still winding our way and fighting with this injunctive lawsuit to come still.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm sorry to hear about the conditions that you're having to live in. When Denka purchased...
Your name and affiliation.
I'm sorry. My name is Christian Howes. I'm an associate member. When Denka bought the plant, were there any disclosures made at that change of ownership? And I was very interested, Ms. Gerard, in your comments about failed audits, if you had any comments that you could make about audits that may have taken place in the DuPont era versus audits that are taking place in the Denka era? In other words, was that transition something that happened seamlessly, or were there any efforts to try and get in and change the situation a little bit? Thank you.
It seems seamless to me because once we heard about the new name, I mean, it had already been done. So we're never the first to know anything. And out of the employees, including management of DuPont, there were all but 5 that transitioned to Denka. So that's pretty seamless, I would think.
I'll just, no, go ahead.
No, go right ahead.
I'll just add that, the timing is a bit strange, the sequence, the timing of how everything happened. So in November 2015 is when the official transfer was executed of the neoprene facility from DuPont to Denka. It officially transferred ownership in November 2015. And then in December 2015 is when the EPA comes out with its National Air Toxics Assessment, saying that the census tract has the highest likelihood in the country of getting cancer from air pollution because of chloroprene emissions from this plant. So very, very sort of strange timing, and Denka has said that they did not know about the EPA's forthcoming National Air Toxics Assessment report when ownership was transferred to them. They have claimed that they did not know.
Thanks. Next question. Let me place question. Do you have some of the locals in the area work for Denka? And did that company help the local economy somehow? Because in such cases, in many places in the world, the company cornered, they try to buy the understanding and loyalty from people. Do you have any reporting about this? Thank you.
They're very secretive about their personnel records. We've requested information on the number of local people that's employed there. They refuse to divulge any of that. But we are living there. We are aware that the large majority of the employees not only are not from reserve, they're not from St. John the Baptist Parish. We watch the traffic patterns. We watch when the shift change. And our streets are blocked up with cars leaving the parish. So I personally know of maybe 5 people that are employed there. But they admit to employing 230 people. And if those 230 people came out of Census Tract 708, which is the one that is so terribly devastated by this plant, I still would not want it there. I would not care about 230 jobs that's going to take the lives of all of the people. That's going to negatively impact the lives of the people. There is no place in all of St. John Parish that has a safe level of chloroprene, according to the Environmental Protection Agency.
And DuPont as well, from their map.
Yeah, there's no doubt that they have poisoned the entire parish. There's no place safe. So when they get our kids from where they are being exposed at 400 times, and there's no place to take them where they will be safe from exposure to chloroprene, DuPont has to lower their emissions. Nobody is talking about that. They're talking about shuffling the people around and getting people who feel they're so close to the plant that to leave. But the government is not regulating this company. What Ms. Gerard alluded to it's about the violations. There have been 10,000 violations documented on the DuPont Denka plant. And to this day, DEQ is not addressing that. They just discovered an illegal open surface disposal site of these poisonous chemicals, We're talking about chloroprene. They emit 29 chemicals. We don't know what they are, what levels, what they do to us. But they talk about chloroprene because they connected it to cancer. But there are 29 that they're doing. They're doing illegal stuff. They break the law all the time. 10,000 violations. Where is the government? We want to know. That place is waiting to blow up on us. Something terrible is going to happen there, and we are not even prepared for it. Our local government is not prepared for a catastrophe of the magnitude that is just imminent. It's got to happen. We've been fortunate. How could they get away with 10,000 violations?
Yes, if you have more questions, we have one. We have one. We have time. Yes, please.
Thanks. Justin McCurry from The Guardian. Thanks very much for coming today. Having listened to what you said, I find it incredible that this hasn't gained more political traction on a national scale. In the US, you have a community where the risk of contracting cancer through air pollution is the highest in the country, and yet you don't seem to have any politicians with a national and international profile taking up your case. So why do you think that is? Thank you.
Well, there's a story you might want to find, and it's called The Tale of Two Cities, and that will break it down quite nicely for you. It's a poor black community that no one seems to be paying attention to, and the other was an affluent white city in Illinois that action was taken, not with chloroprene, but with some other chemicals within 6 months or so. But it's quite interesting that you to show those two comparisons, and I think that's one of the reasons.
We are considered the low-hanging fruit. We are less able to defend ourselves, and it seems to be working out that we're the less cared about in the community in America. How could, like you said, how could this go on so long without something being done? How could our governor ignore us? For 3 years, we've been making noise. They talk about our red shirts and we're troublemakers because we haven't gone away. They didn't expect this little ragtag group to last 3 years and to get international attention. And that, I think, is nobody did anything. They looked at us and said, they'll go away, leave them alone, just ignore them. Obviously, I can't, if this statement I just made, that there were 10,000 violations, that was submitted to us, documents. Why don't they see, is that true? Would they tolerate that? Why don't somebody, we've been talking about it, why don't somebody investigate that? I would think they would say this chemical plant sitting in the middle of this community, 1,500 feet from a school, but that school, that community starts another 1,000. They got the homes to start 500 feet from that plant. I would think somebody would say, well, if they're doing those kind of violations, let's go. How could they get away? Who's responsible for that? So the question there, it begs something somebody called environmental racism or something. I can't understand it. I can't understand why they would not care about those 500 black kids in that school being exposed at that level. Not even our local government took a step to do anything about it. That is a great question I would like to have answered.
Thank you. Any more questions? Just follow up. Do you plan to meet any Japanese politicians to promote your case in Tokyo? Thank you.
Politicians, no. We have met and are still seeking to meet with additional shareholders of Denka. our last trip, we were able to meet with a couple of shareholders and kind of press them on what their process is for engaging with Denka, potentially divesting their funds, and those were productive conversations. So that's the direction that we're moving in. I also would just want to mention one quick thing, which is that Denka Performance Elastomer, the U.S. subsidiary of Denka Company Limited, is currently engaged in a process with the EPA to try to get the EPA's standard for chloroprene emissions to be altered. So they submitted a request for reconsideration of the EPA's emission standard for chloroprene, and in that process, they have now hired a private consulting group called Ramble. And Ramble and Denka have sat in several meetings with the EPA, and Ramble has basically designed this pseudoscientific model that estimates a much higher safety threshold for chloroprene than the EPA does, and is essentially sort of lobbying the EPA to try to adopt this pseudoscientific model that they developed when Denka hired them. So Denka is essentially seeking to purchase science or pseudoscience from this private consulting group and seeking to change the EPA's emission standards in that way. So that's another very alarming aspect of this story. The fact that the EPA would even sit in the same room and engage with one of the companies that it's supposed to regulate, and in this manner is alarming and something to follow up on.
All right, thank you very much. I think this wraps up our event today. I appreciate you coming that long distance to talk about your case, and I wish you all the best. And I think all the friends here, they can just approach after the official ending and they can chat with you over the issue. Thank you. Please, ladies and gentlemen, give a round of applause for our guests before they leave. Thank you very much.
Thank you.